Sometimes you have to lose everything to realize how strong you really are. Those words didn't mean much to me back then. Not when I was sitting in my car, hands trembling on the steering wheel, replaying his voice in my head, calm, confident, cruel. "You'll lose everything, Linda," he said. "The house, the savings, even your reputation. I'll make sure of it." That was my ex-husband, Mark. We'd been divorced for almost a year, but peace never came. He'd found a new way to hurt me, through the courtroom. He was charming, successful, the kind of man who always looked like he had his life together. And for years, I helped him build that image. I managed our finances, stood by him during layoffs, even worked 2 jobs when his business ventures failed. I never complained. I believed marriage meant teamwork. Until the day I found out he'd been moving money out of our joint account, slowly, quietly, for over a year. When I confronted him, he didn't deny it. He just smiled. "You'll thank me one day," he said. "You're too emotional to handle money." I remember standing there, holding the printed bank statements in my shaking hands, realizing that the man I trusted for 20 years had been preparing my downfall. Fast forward to that morning in court. He was sitting with his new attorney, a young, confident woman in a navy suit, while my public defender organized her notes with quiet anxiety. I couldn't afford a big lawyer, Mark knew that. He filed motions faster than I could even respond. He accused me of hiding assets. Me, the woman who once lent him her retirement savings. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I sat still, because something inside me had shifted. The night before, I'd gone through every single folder, every receipt, every digital trace I could find. Years of being a meticulous wife had given me a gift, documentation. And I had quietly gathered everything. Emails, transfer logs, screenshots, even photos of handwritten notes he'd left around the house. I'd also reached out to someone, not a lawyer, but my old friend Denise, who worked in accounting. She'd helped me put everything in order, showing me what patterns mattered. "Linda," she said, "if you stay calm and organized, you'll win. Don't let him drag you into emotion. That's his game." So when the judge called my name, I stood. My voice didn't shake. My palms were cold, but steady. Mark's lawyer started her argument, painting me as unstable and vindictive, a woman obsessed with punishing her ex. Mark leaned back in his chair, smirking like he'd already won. Then it was my turn. I opened the folder I'd brought, plain manila, labeled Truth. I handed the judge a file containing 20 pages of transaction records, neatly cross-referenced with timestamps and Mark's own emails authorizing each transfer. Silence filled the room. The judge looked up. "Mr. Daniels," she said slowly, "these are your emails?" Mark blinked. I'd have to check." That was the first time I saw him stumble. It wasn't over yet, but in that instant, I felt something powerful, a calm strength rising in me. Not anger, not revenge, just control. For years, he had spoken for me. Now, I was speaking for myself. And I wasn't done yet. I could feel Mark's eyes on me, like he was trying to read what else I had up my sleeve. For once, I didn't look away. The judge cleared her throat and leaned forward. "Mr. Daniels," she said, "these documents show consistent withdrawals from joint accounts over several months. Your email signature authorizes them. Do you dispute that?" Mark stammered something about business needs and temporary loans, but his voice lost the confidence it had that morning. I just sat there, hands folded neatly on the table, silent. That silence was my armor. You see, when you've been manipulated for years, quiet becomes your survival instinct. But that day, it was my power. As the judge flipped through my file, I noticed a subtle shift in the courtroom. The bailiff looked up from his phone. Even the young attorney stopped smiling. When the hearing ended, the judge didn't give a final ruling. She said she needed to review the evidence. But her tone had changed. And so had mine. Outside the courtroom, Mark caught up with me in the hallway. He spoke low, his voice a mix of charm and threat. "You think you're clever, huh?" he said. "You can't win this. I've got connections, Linda. You don't." I looked at him, really looked. The same man who used to make me coffee every morning now looked like a stranger in a suit that didn't quite fit as perfectly as it used to. "I'm not trying to win," I said quietly. "I'm just telling the truth." He smirked again, but there was a flicker of something, maybe fear, maybe disbelief. I walked away without turning back. When I got home, I placed my keys on the kitchen counter and exhaled for what felt like the first time in years. The apartment was small, 1 bedroom, rented after I'd left the house we once shared, but it was mine. No ghosts, no lies. Just quiet. I made myself tea and sat by the window. My hands were still trembling slightly, but it wasn't fear anymore. It was adrenaline. I opened my laptop and started organizing every single document again, not out of obsession, but clarity. I labeled folders: court evidence, personal statements, timeline. Denise called later that night. "How did it go?" she asked. "Better than he expected," I said. She laughed softly. "Good. Now keep it that way. Stay one step ahead." Over the next week, I worked like someone possessed. I reviewed every text, every shared bank account, every mortgage document. I even pulled his old messages from our joint iCloud, the ones where he'd bragged about hiding funds from the IRS. Not to destroy him, but to protect myself. When my lawyer called, I could tell she was surprised. "Linda," she said, "this is impressive. Most people panic. You're building a solid case." I smiled faintly. "I panicked for years," I said. "Now I'm done." Then came the twist, an email from Mark's attorney. They were offering a settlement, but the terms were insulting. I'd get a fraction of what I was owed in exchange for dropping the case. Old Linda might have agreed, just to end the pain. But not this time. I wrote one line back. "No deal. We'll continue in court." It was the calmest sentence I'd ever written, but it felt like thunder in my chest. That night, I slept peacefully for the first time in months. Because for once, I wasn't reacting to his power. I was owning mine. The next hearing came faster than I expected. A gray Thursday morning. The kind that feels heavy even before anything happens. I parked my old Honda outside the courthouse, clutching a neat binder filled with documents. Not the leather one Mark used to flaunt, just a simple plastic folder with tabs and color-coded notes. But it held something far more powerful than he realized: the truth. As I walked through security, I caught a glimpse of myself in the metal detector's reflection. I looked tired, yes, but there was something new in my face. Resolve. Inside the courtroom, Mark was already there. He looked irritated, checking his watch, whispering sharply to his lawyer. I almost smiled. He hated waiting. He was used to control, to things going his way. When the judge entered, everyone rose. The usual formality. But this time, I wasn't intimidated. I'd earned my place in that room. Mark's lawyer began her argument with fake sympathy. "Your Honor," she said, "my client is deeply concerned about Mrs. Daniels' emotional state. We believe this case is an attempt at retaliation, not justice." I didn't flinch. Instead, I pulled out my next piece of evidence, calm, precise, undeniable. "Your Honor," I said when it was my turn, "these are the wire transfers Mr. Daniels made to an offshore account, during the exact months he claims I was hiding assets. The routing numbers match his business account, and the timestamps correspond with his emails to our accountant." A pause. The judge adjusted her glasses. "You have documentation?" "Yes, ma'am." I handed it over. My fingers didn't shake this time. Mark shifted in his seat. His face twitched slightly, then tightened. He whispered something to his lawyer, but it was too late. The judge had already begun reading. I could feel every heartbeat echoing in my chest. For a moment, I remembered the night I found that first suspicious transaction. How I'd sat at the kitchen table at 2 a.m., surrounded by bills and tears, wondering how I could have been so blind. I remembered begging him to tell me the truth, and his laughter, that cruel, dismissive laugh that still echoed in my dreams. But standing there now, I felt that version of myself fading. The judge looked up. "Mrs. Daniels, this evidence raises serious questions about your ex-husband's financial conduct. We will require a full review of his accounts before proceeding further." Mark's lawyer tried to object, but the judge cut her off. "Enough. We will reconvene in 3 weeks." 3 weeks. That was time, and time was something I finally knew how to use. Outside, as the wind hit my face, Mark followed me again. He was angry this time. His voice dropped to a growl. "You're playing a dangerous game, Linda. You think this will make you look strong? You'll just embarrass yourself." I turned to him slowly. "No," I said quietly. "You embarrassed me for years. I'm just cleaning up the mess." He blinked. For a second, he didn't know what to say. That silence, it was worth everything. When I got home, I called Denise again. She picked up on the first ring. "I think he's finally scared," I said. She chuckled. "Good. Fear is just the sound of power shifting." That night, I started preparing for what came next, not just the court case, but my future. I updated my resume. I reconnected with old clients. I even joined a small local women's group for legal self-advocacy. Because I was done surviving. Now I was rebuilding. And deep down, I knew Mark hadn't seen anything yet. 3 weeks later, I walked back into that courthouse with my head held high. No trembling. No panic. Just quiet focus. The clerk recognized me at the door. "Back again, Mrs. Daniels?" he said kindly. "Yeah," I replied, smiling faintly. Still fighting the good fight. It wasn't bravado. It was truth. The night before, I'd barely slept, not from fear, but preparation. I'd spent hours reviewing everything. New financial disclosures, old tax forms, even a few witness statements from people who'd worked with Mark. A pattern was emerging, and I was ready to make it visible. Inside, Mark looked different this time. Less confident. More cornered. He didn't even look me in the eye. His lawyer spoke first, trying to shift the narrative. "Your Honor, my client maintains that any discrepancies in his financial records were clerical errors. Nothing intentional." But the judge wasn't having it. "Mr. Daniels, these errors seem to occur in your favor each time. That's a curious coincidence." I sat still, hands folded on the table, like Denise had told me. "Never interrupt when the truth is working for you," she said. When my turn came, I kept it simple. "Your Honor," I said softly, "this isn't about money anymore. It's about honesty. I supported my husband for 20 years. I worked, I saved, I trusted him. I just want what's fair, and I don't want to be lied about anymore." You could have heard a pin drop. Even the court reporter paused for a heartbeat before resuming typing. Mark's lawyer shifted in her chair. Mark finally spoke, his voice cracking slightly. "She's exaggerating," he said. She's trying to destroy my reputation." I looked at him calmly. "No, Mark. You did that yourself." He went silent. The judge glanced between us, then said something I'll never forget. "Mr. Daniels, if what Mrs. Daniels presented today continues to hold under review, this court will consider sanctions for false claims. I strongly suggest you cooperate." It wasn't a final ruling, but it was the first time someone with power saw through him. Afterward, I walked out into the crisp afternoon air, feeling the weight in my chest lift, just a little. Denise met me at a cafe down the street. She waved as I walked in, grinning like a proud sister. "So, how'd it go?" I slid into the seat across from her. "He's slipping. The judge sees it now." We ordered coffee. I hadn't tasted anything that good in months. Denise leaned closer. "You know, Linda, this is bigger than just your case. What you're doing, it's what so many women are too scared to do. You're showing that calm doesn't mean weak." Her words hit deep. Because that had been my struggle, people mistaking my silence for surrender. But that silence was my discipline now. My weapon. Later that night back home, I sat by my small desk and stared at a framed photo of my younger self, me and Mark at our wedding, smiling like we knew the future. I didn't feel anger anymore. Just closure beginning to take shape. I whispered to that old version of myself, "You didn't fail. You just trusted the wrong person too long." Then I put the photo away. Not in the trash, but in a box labeled past. Because that's all it was now, something behind me. But as I turned off the light, my phone buzzed. A new email from Mark's lawyer. The subject line read, "Urgent, upcoming motion to suppress evidence." I stared at it for a long moment. He wasn't done fighting dirty. And suddenly I knew neither was I. I opened that email 3 times before I could process it. Motion to suppress evidence. Translation: Mark was trying to get the documents I'd submitted thrown out, claiming I'd obtained them illegally. I almost laughed. The same man who'd siphoned money out of our joint accounts without a word was suddenly concerned about procedure. But the laugh didn't last long. Because I knew what this move meant, he was scared. And scared men like Mark don't back off, they double down. I called my lawyer, Maria, first thing in the morning. She was direct and calm as always. "This is a common tactic," she said. "They're hoping to intimidate you into withdrawing your evidence or settling early." "Can they actually suppress it?" I asked. "Not if we can show it came from shared accounts or devices." "Which we can." Her voice had a steadiness I needed. "You did everything right, Linda. Don't let him rattle you." Still, when I hung up, my stomach twisted. The hearing for the motion was scheduled a week later. I spent those days preparing obsessively, labeling every document, highlighting timestamps, and writing a statement of how I'd access them legally. On the morning of the hearing, I woke up before dawn. I sat at my kitchen table with a mug of black coffee, staring at the soft light creeping through the blinds. My hands were steady now, a quiet miracle I didn't take for granted. In court, Mark walked in wearing a new suit. His hair perfectly styled, his expression smug again. That same look he used to wear when he'd talk circles around me during arguments, calm, confident, cruel. But I wasn't the same woman anymore. His lawyer started with her speech, all legal polish and performative concern. Your Honor, the evidence presented by Mrs. Daniels was obtained without Mr. Daniels' consent. She accessed his private communications and banking information. I stood when the judge gave me the nod. Your Honor, I said, voice level. These are joint accounts. Shared finances. Every email and document came from records both of us had legal access to. And I brought copies of the account authorizations with both our signatures. I handed over the folder. It clicked softly as it opened, the sound of truth landing where it needed to. Mark's lawyer looked thrown off. The judge skimmed the first few pages, her brow furrowing slightly. Mrs. Daniels, she said, this is meticulous. It appears you had every right to these records. Then she turned to Mark. Mr. Daniels, are you aware your name appears as co-owner on every document in question? Mark's mouth opened, then closed. He stammered something about oversight. The judge leaned back, unimpressed. I'm denying the motion to suppress. We'll proceed with Mrs. Daniels' evidence. And just like that, his latest tactic collapsed. He tried to stare me down as we left, but there was something different in his eyes now, desperation. Outside the courtroom, I didn't say a word to him. I didn't need to. Silence spoke louder than anything I could have said. Later that night, Denise called again. He tried the legal scare tactic, huh? She said. Yeah, I replied, smiling tiredly. It didn't work. She laughed. He's learning you can't outsmart calm. After I hung up, I sat quietly by the window again. It was raining softly, the kind of slow drizzle that feels like the world washing itself clean. I thought about all the years I'd been afraid of him, afraid of losing the house, the reputation, the fight. But what I realized was this. Fear only works when you keep it secret. Once you face it out loud, it loses its hold. I didn't just want to win anymore. I wanted to walk away knowing he couldn't touch my peace again. And for the first time, I believed that was possible. A week later, I walked into court feeling a strange mixture of nerves and excitement. The air smelled faintly of old coffee and polished wood, the same scent that used to make me tense with anxiety. Not today. Today, it smelled like opportunity. Mark was there, of course. He always was, sitting smugly in his tailored suit, surrounded by his entourage of lawyers. But the smile he gave me this time wasn't confident. It was forced. The judge called the session to order. Today, we were reviewing the compiled financial evidence. Every withdrawal, every transfer, every discrepancy. The room felt heavy with anticipation. When my lawyer, Maria, began presenting the evidence, I noticed something remarkable. The judge was taking notes meticulously, her attention fixed on the details. Every carefully organized document, every timeline I had constructed, was doing its work. Mark tried to interrupt once, leaning forward with a defensive tone. Objection, he barked, his voice shaky for the first time. The judge raised a hand. Mr. Daniels, she said firmly, please let the evidence speak. I didn't need to say a word. I simply watched, calm and composed, as my story unfolded on paper and screen. It was in that moment, as the judge leaned over the exhibits, scrutinizing my spreadsheets and emails, that I realized something vital. I wasn't fighting a man. I was fighting fear itself. For years, fear had controlled me. Fear of humiliation, fear of loss, fear of being dismissed. Mark had wielded it like a weapon. But now fear was powerless. I was steady. I was prepared. I was unshakable. During the break, I sat in the hallway, scrolling through old messages from Mark. Each one was a reminder of what I had endured. His dismissive words, his false promises, his quiet betrayals. But instead of anger, I felt clarity. I had built a fortress from every tear, every late night, every moment of doubt. Every document I presented was a brick. Every timeline I reconstructed was a wall. And now I was standing inside that fortress, unafraid, untouchable. When court resumed, the final witness statements were read. People who had worked closely with Mark and could confirm discrepancies in his accounts. I listened quietly, letting the truth settle into the room. And then, the judge looked at Mark and said something I will never forget. Mr. Daniels, these records are thorough, credible, and consistent. Your attempts to obfuscate the truth have been noted. This court takes Mrs. Daniels' claims seriously. The words struck me like sunlight breaking through clouds. Relief, satisfaction, and a deep, quiet pride surged through me. Later, walking out of the courthouse, I didn't glance at Mark. I didn't need to. I knew he was shaken. He couldn't meet my eyes. Instead, I walked straight to my car, feeling a rare, unfiltered sense of victory. Not the kind born of revenge, but the kind born of justice. That night, as I lay in bed, I reflected on everything I had endured. The humiliation, the betrayal, the sleepless nights. And I realized something profound. Strength isn't loud. It isn't about anger or aggression. It's about persistence, preparation, and calm resolve. And I had all of it. I whispered into the dark. You tried to break me. You only made me stronger. The next hearing would be the final one, the moment where everything could change. But I knew deep in my heart that I was ready. I wasn't just defending my assets or my reputation anymore. I was reclaiming my dignity, my power, my life. The final hearing arrived on a crisp morning. Sunlight filtered through the tall courthouse windows, casting sharp lines across the polished wood floor. I felt the weight of every preparation, every late night, every painstaking detail I had gathered. This was it, the culmination of months of quiet, relentless work. Mark was there, of course. He tried to look calm, but the tension in his jaw betrayed him. His smirk, so familiar and irritating, was gone. He knew, even if he wouldn't admit it, that the game had changed. When the judge called the session to order, the courtroom was still. Lawyers shuffled papers. The stenographer's fingers danced across the keyboard. And I sat, hands folded, eyes steady, heart calm. Maria, my lawyer, presented the evidence once again, highlighting the transfers, the emails, the contradictions in Mark's claims. Each point landed like a quiet hammer, precise and undeniable. Then came the moment I had been waiting for, the direct confrontation. Mark's lawyer tried to speak for him, but the judge waved her off. Mr. Daniels, the judge said, you may speak. He leaned forward, voice measured but strained. I think there's been a misunderstanding. I didn't intend for this to become what it has. I looked at him, calm and unflinching. My voice was steady when I spoke. Mark, there's no misunderstanding. You moved money without my knowledge, lied about it, and tried to frame me in court. I kept calm. I collected the evidence, and I've presented the truth. That's all there is. You can't rewrite it. He opened his mouth to argue, but I didn't let him. I simply continued. This isn't about revenge. It's about accountability. It's about me finally being seen and heard. It's about justice for me and for every woman who's ever been dismissed, underestimated, or humiliated. The courtroom was quiet. The judge's gaze softened, not with pity, but with recognition of the calm authority I now carried. Mark's shoulders slumped slightly. He tried to defend himself further, but every argument felt hollow now. Every attempt to charm or intimidate rendered useless by the evidence and the clarity of my words. By the end of the session, it was clear who had the moral and legal high ground. The judge scheduled the final ruling for a week later, signaling that my evidence and composure had shifted the momentum entirely. Walking out, I didn't look back at him. I didn't need to. He was defeated not by fury, but by my unwavering calm, my meticulous preparation, and my refusal to shrink. That night, I sat by my window with a cup of chamomile tea. Rain pattered softly against the glass. I reflected on the journey, from humiliation and betrayal to this newfound strength. Every sleepless night, every tear shed in silence, every quiet phone call and email had led me here. I realized then that true power doesn't come from anger or intimidation. It comes from persistence, intelligence, and the courage to stand firm in your truth. For the first time in months, I felt completely free. And in that freedom, I whispered to myself, I am stronger than I ever knew. I am enough. The final day arrived quietly, without fanfare. The courtroom felt different this time, less tense, less oppressive. I walked in with the same calm confidence that had carried me through every hearing, every motion, every attempt Mark had made to intimidate me. Mark sat there, suit crisp but eyes tired. His lawyer whispered something to him, but he barely looked at the papers in front of him. He knew the tide had turned. The judge reviewed the case one last time, flipping through my neatly organized binder. Then she looked up. Mrs. Daniels, she said, voice firm but fair. Based on the evidence presented, it is clear that Mr. Daniels' claims are unfounded. His financial actions and attempts to misrepresent the facts have been thoroughly documented. This court rules in your favor. Full restitution of assets, and any further actions against you will be considered frivolous and subject to sanction. Relief washed over me in a quiet, almost surreal wave. I didn't scream. I didn't jump. I simply exhaled long, deep, steady. Years of fear, humiliation, and betrayal had finally been met with truth. Mark's face fell. He looked like a man who had realized the consequences of his actions too late. For a moment, I felt a pang of pity, but it was fleeting. What mattered was me, my life, my dignity, my strength. Outside, the sun had broken through the clouds. The rain from the past few weeks had stopped, leaving the streets wet and glistening. I walked slowly to my car, savoring every step. Each footfall felt like a reclamation of time, of trust in myself, of my power. That night, I sat in my apartment, alone but not lonely. I lit a candle, its warm glow reflecting in the quiet room. I thought about everything I had endured, the lies, the manipulation, the humiliation, and the endless fear. And I realized something profound. The real victory wasn't in winning the case. It was in reclaiming my voice. My calm, deliberate actions had turned betrayal into justice, humiliation into empowerment. I had learned that strength isn't loud or vengeful. It's patient, composed, and unwavering. I looked at the photo of myself years ago, when I thought strength meant tolerating everything silently, when I believed my value depended on others' approval. I no longer recognized her. She was not weak. She was learning. And now, I was the woman I had always wanted to be, whole, self-assured, unshakable. I whispered softly to myself. Sometimes you have to lose everything to realize how strong you really are. But this time it was different. This time I knew the truth of it. I had lost nothing that mattered. I had gained everything. I poured myself a cup of tea, sat by the window, and let the silence settle around me. Peace. Calm. Power. And then I asked, quietly but intentionally, a question that would linger. If you were in my place, what would you have done? Write it in the comments.